This is the site of a colliery that was sunk in 1853 in Swannington. It is actually Califat Colliery, and it's number 2 in the Califat Colliery Company series. Its name was Califat, named after a redoubt in the Russo-Austrian War, and it actually operated under a management which actually comprised 2 people, Mr. Walker and Warswick. They had actually moved into the area to exploit the local mining opportunities, and they sank 3 mines. The first one at Peg's Green, which was called California Mine, sunk obviously in 1849. They sank another one at Calcutta, that was in 1853, and this one also in 1853. It operated into deeper coal seams that had been previously inaccessible, and produced quite large quantities of coal, so that 3 mines between them by about 1870 were sending about 170,000 tonnes of coal along the remainder of the Leicester and Swannington Railway, now the Midland Railway, into Leicester. So it was quite a profitable operation. The problem in mining in this area that we've had now 800 years of coal mining, and all the water held up in shallower workings previously had actually gathered in areas which were known by the old miners as old hollows, and this was finally completed, or filled up rather, in the 1780s, 1790s by the closure of a colliery at Limby Hall. They'd abandoned that with no working plans, only memories of where the workings were, and the whole thing was totally full of water. And one evening in October 1863, those waters broke into this mine on the night shift and drowned the pit out in about 11 minutes. That disaster actually led to the loss of 3 lives. And so we're looking at a colliery which operated for a relatively short period of time, very, very high output to the very lowest of the coal seams available to it, and at that time obviously it was closed and abandoned shortly afterwards, but all the water held up then started running down the seams into the coal mines in Colville and causing real problems in terms of their future. And so a joint pumping company was set up between the Colville and the Swannington Califat mines to hopefully drain the water held up therein. And so this was at the site of a replaced engine, which was done on another site in the Spinney here, which we excavated in about 1999. That's a large pumping engine fitted there, which I gather was capable of raising about 720 gallons of water a minute. And that worked for a certain length of time in cohesion with 2 other pumping systems at Peg's Green and at Calcutta, but they still couldn't cope. And so a joint pumping company set up a large engine at formed Calcutta Colliery, which actually was able to pump 3,000 gallons of water a minute, and it did that for 70 years without losing a stroke. So we're looking at a site here which has been used, flooded out, resited with a pumping engine, and that actually operated for that period of time up until the installation of the Calcutta engine, by which time this site was then abandoned. The owners took their labour force up into Nottinghamshire, a large proportion of it, to live in and work in mines which they'd instituted at Hucknall and Skegby and Stanton, and they carried on operating there. At the same time, it seems that they took most of their equipment, so we have here a site in which all the equipment had been removed. In the previous excavation of the other engine house, we found very little in terms of hardware or equipment, just the foundations of an engine house. Even the majority of the bolts had been taken away. And here we were left with a pile of bricks on what seemed a peculiar sort of structure. So in about 2007 we decided what we would do is to take off the bricks from the surface, and that exposed a brick floor rather, which when we investigated it further was found to be just loose bricks laid on what in essence was boiler ash. The brick debris that we found here was covering what we later found out to be this long plinth, which actually reaches from side to side along the building, and that has four sets of holding down bolts, two of them here, two of them further along there, and in fact the bolt hole there goes down about 6.5 feet down to the base of this engine house. We've excavated the channel on this side of the building up to about half its length, and there are various brick sockets in the wall which obviously held some sort of structures which at the moment we can't understand. And there are features in the structure which suggest here that there was quite a considerable engine which was driving something or other. We're not quite sure yet what. Our thoughts are at the moment that it's in fact a fan, a ventilation engine, which replaced a former furnace ventilation system which operated within the pit. And over here we can actually see a section of the tunnel which was used for ventilation of the coal mine. The ventilation tunnel here, which is, you can see, formed with specially made bricks to make even flow, actually moves out in that direction and then curves around to the pit top, which in fact is just beyond the rather orangey autumn coloured tree there. That actually, the tunnel there was very, very carefully blocked. It's actually been stowed with loose materials, but every so often there's quite a definite dam of bricks built across it, obviously to stop any leakage of air running along it. Where that went to we're still unsure, because it actually peters out round about here, but if we take the natural course of it, then it actually leads into yet another tunnel which leads off at right angles, which you can see in the position down here, and that exits the site more or less in the gateway of the site. Again, that's been dammed off. The tunnel does extend this way, but it's been dammed off there to actually stop any leakage of air or whatever it might have been. Certainly not water, because there's no evidence of any residuum in the base of the thing at all, and there's sign of heat on the bricks on either side there. So our guess at the moment is that somewhere here was a furnace bed which actually drew the air out of the pit and then was exited up a chimney, which was probably over on the corner of the site there. But this is all surmise with no evidence for the actual structure, because there are no detail of it yet found. Next door to the engine house which we've just been looking at, we thought there was a chimney base somewhere, but in fact when we started to investigate we find quite a complicated structure here which appears to be a boiler house, which we could interpret as holding two egg-ended boilers the full length of the building there. But the more we excavate, in fact the more complications we find. And so we're really just at the moment weighing things up, finding out what the dimensions of the places are, so that we can start to put in some dimensions and try to interpret what might be there in any structure finally. This work is all being done by volunteers from the Leicestershire Industrial History Society, who are liaising with Swannington Heritage Trust in this work. Swannington Heritage Trust obviously own the site that we're working on at the present time.
Are you standing on it? Fingers crossed.